So I want to thank everyone who worked on this effort to save lives in Colorado, to make Colorado safer for everybody from fentanyl poisoning in particular, which is the subject of this bill. Making Colorado one of the 10 safest states over the next 5 years is one of our top priorities. There's a lot of very constructive public safety work this session, but far too many Coloradans have lost their lives to fentanyl poisoning. Many of them didn't even know they were using drugs that were laced with fentanyl. And frankly, across our state, people are simply fed up with the pain that this new and dangerous drug is inflicting in our communities. This bill, along with the over $180 million we're investing in public safety this year, give local law enforcement, our sheriffs, our police, our communities, the tools they need to make our communities safer. We're giving local law enforcement and prosecutors tools they need to crack down on those responsible, with greater penalties for dealers and those who contaminate other drugs with fentanyl. This bill creates stiffer penalties for those peddling the evil poison. It does a lot more than that. It's a comprehensive solution that also seeks to get support to those suffering from addiction before a tragedy occurs. Because investigating and successfully prosecuting a tragedy and holding those responsible under the penalty of law is important, but our biggest goal should be to prevent a tragedy from occurring. And this increase in crime that we've seen occur in Denver and several other cities is simply unacceptable in our state. And we've heard far too many excuses and scapegoating, and that's why this legislation and the comprehensive public safety efforts of this legislative session are extremely important to make Colorado safer. Not only did our legislature pass this important bipartisan legislation to take a step forward in addressing the devastating impact of fentanyl poisoning, but the General Assembly also stepped up to invest more than the state has ever invested before in supporting local law enforcement, community interventions, more and better policing, youth violence prevention programs, and bringing more investigative powers to bear through the Colorado Bureau of Investigations, because that is what this moment calls for. It calls for leadership. Enough is enough. There are many families with us today who suffered the ultimate loss. There are thousands of other victims across the state. And of course, victims deserve justice, but they also deserve leaders who demonstrate that they're doing everything possible to prevent additional senseless tragedies from fentanyl poisoning. Policing is done locally, and we need local leadership across our state to rise to this occasion as well. And I want to thank some of the local leaders who are stepping up, who have been advocates of this important bipartisan legislation. DAs Michael Doherty and Dan Rubenstein and Brian Mason were helpful in crafting and supporting this bill. This bill is the result of months of work. And in the Colorado way, we emerged with legislation that takes a big step forward to make our state safer and save lives. And I want to thank our courageous legislative sponsors for their bold leadership on this bill, the stakeholders who made their voice heard throughout the process. Now, I'm happy to introduce somebody who has shown real leadership. Rather than say it's somebody else's problem, he took it upon himself to make this a priority to get done, because it met the challenge of the times. Speaker Garnett has seen what is happening here in Denver and in other communities, and he dug in and he did the work to get this bipartisan legislation through. He made sure never to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, because lives are at stake, and every life is worth fighting for. If it was easy, it would have been done already. Thank you, Speaker Alec Garnett.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Let me first thank you, Governor, for your leadership, for your counsel through this very, very challenging session and through this very, very challenging issue. I also want to thank Senator Cook, Senator Patterson for your work on helping craft this legislation and move it through the General Assembly. To the families standing behind me, thank you for coming and telling your stories, to talking to legislators, to doing everything that you can to make sure that your pain isn't shared by more families across the state. We all owe you for your courage. To District Attorney McCann and Mason, thank you for your leadership. To the DA Council, thank you for coming together and helping make sure that the bill that we started out with in December really became a comprehensive, bold approach forward. The harm reduction pieces that are in House Bill 1326 are a historic investment in making sure that Colorado communities have the resources they need to help save lives. No time have we ever invested more in harm reduction than we are in House Bill 1326 today. To the criminal sentencing side, we are making sure that those that are peddling this poison are held accountable, and we will get pills off of the street. For those who believe that 4 grams of fentanyl is an appropriate amount for personal use, that is simply not true. From personal use, we have reduced that to 1 gram. That, I believe, is an appropriate step forward for this point in this discussion to make sure we're getting pills off the street and we are helping save lives. In my legislative career, I have taken on some very challenging issues. I have never taken on a challenging issue quite like this. At every step of the way, from the left to the right, people try to defeat this legislation because they would prefer, either for political purposes or for their own finger pointing, to have nothing done. Even up to the last day of session, there were attempts of individuals to try to defeat this legislation. The fact that we are standing here is a testament to the Colorado way, to the bipartisan leadership of the people who are standing here, to the voices of the families standing behind us. And I am proud to say this is the boldest, most comprehensive step forward to attack the fentanyl epidemic that this state has ever seen, and I believe states across the country will begin to follow. So thanks so much for being here today. Thanks again to the families who helped make sure that resources were included to make sure that investigations happen across the state so that answers are provided to any deaths that happen in the future. With that, I want to introduce Senator Patterson. Thank you so much for your leadership, and I look forward to hearing your remarks.
I don't have any prepared. Thank you, Speaker Garnett. It has been a pleasure to work with you for 8 years. I can't believe we are both done now. Is this your last bill signing as well? Well, I want to thank all of the families who are here today, to also Blue Rising, who brought everybody together with an advocate to support them. You all took some of the most difficult losses and heartbreak to go fight to ensure other families don't have to go through the same thing. So thank you for sharing your story. It has been an emotional, difficult bill to work on. I want to thank Senator Cook for staying with us, not letting perfect be the enemy of the good, coming to the table, knowing that moving the ball forward was the most important thing here. I am grateful for your leadership. This is the third wave of the opioid epidemic. First, it was the overprescribing of pills, cutting people off without access to treatment and leading to people using heroin, to ultimately fentanyl taking over the drug supply chain and people becoming addicted to one of the most deadly and unpredictable drugs out there. Unfortunately, in Colorado and across the nation, we have seen a significant increase in overdose deaths. It wasn't just fentanyl coming in. It first hit the coast and it moved its way into Colorado, but it also came at a time where we had a pandemic, where we had increased anxieties, where we had increased substance use disorders, and people without access to care. I can't tell you the countless stories of people that I have heard throughout our communities who relapsed during that time, who didn't have access to the treatment that they needed, and unfortunately died from an overdose. You all know that this is very personal to me. This is something that has hit my family hard. My mom, I have sat by her bedside at the hospital numerous times because of a fentanyl overdose. But we are one of the lucky ones because my mom actually got the help that she needed. You have people like my mom who have become addicted to fentanyl because it has taken over the drug supply chain. And you also have people who had no idea that they were taking fentanyl. They thought they were buying an anxiety pill or something that might relax them after school. And unfortunately, far too many people have lost their loved ones because they had no idea that they were taking fentanyl and because of fentanyl poisonings. So this is a comprehensive approach, not only to help people like my mom who are struggling with addiction, making sure that we have naloxone for our first responders. We're bringing additional accountability for distribution that results in death. This is a new crime. This is something that we heard across the board that is needed for people who are poisoning our communities. And one of the most important pieces is this is holding the drug distributors, the cartel, accountable. It increases penalties significantly and it provides funding for disrupting the supply chain. Fentanyl is poisoning the United States and countries across the world. This is the drug of choice for cartels because it is very potent and it's easy to traffic. So this unfortunately is not going to be over. This is going to take years of dedicated work. This is the beginning. Well, I would say we've been doing this work for many years, demanding increasing access to treatment and trying to change and reform our behavioral health system. And this is going to take many more years to come. We've already seen that on the East Coast, there is a drug, ISO, that is hit that is at least 3 to 5 times more potent than fentanyl. So this is the beginning of what we need to do to step up, to help support families, go after the cartels, and keep our families whole and make sure that we're preventing the heartbreak that too many people across Colorado have faced. I truly want to thank everybody behind me for being with us today. I know it was a roller coaster for all of us to be a part of, not knowing how this bill was going to end. And your voice, your stories made it happen. So thank you for being with us, for fighting for change. And we're going to need you next year and the year after that. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my amazing co-prime sponsor, Senator Cook.
Thank you, Senator Patterson. First off, I'd like to thank the families that came down and testified, the families that are here. Your stories were compelling and impactful. They truly made a difference on this bill. And I would like to thank the governor for his leadership, Speaker Garnett, and again, Senator Patterson for their leadership on this. You know, if it weren't for the families, I'm not sure this bill would have ended up passing. They were, like I said, very impactful. Their stories were heartbreaking. And I think it turned a lot of attention to the families and away from the parts of the bill that weren't popular. And I think, you know, like I said, I'm thinking back to their stories, and I'm having a hard time even talking now after thinking of those stories and the loved ones that you lost. You know, like Speaker Garnett, I worked on a lot of big bills, a lot of important bills in my 8 years here, and this one, like he said, was probably the most important and the most impactful for me. You know, some people said it went too far. He was getting a lot of pressure from his side, said it was going too far. I got a lot of pressure from my side that said it didn't go far enough. But I think when you have those two groups, you know, saying one group says it goes too far, the other doesn't go far enough, I think we're in a good spot. I think we ended up in the right spot, in a balance. Unfortunately, there was a lot of rhetoric associated with this bill, and most people, unfortunately, listen to that rhetoric. It does so many amazing things. $33 million for education and for treatment. Again, we haven't seen that kind of money going towards treatment, I think, in the history of Colorado. So it does a lot that. And it does, on the other side, puts the drug dealers away. We can't have people out here peddling this kind of poison to our families and our children. And people that get caught the first time, you know, with under an ounce is still a misdemeanor. And anything between 1 and 4 becomes a felony. But it gives the tools to law enforcement to investigate those cases, but it also gives the tools to the DA to get those people into treatment. Gets them into treatment, and that's what the whole goal is here. So, again, I just think this is an amazing bill. I'm proud to have my name on it. One of the other things that we learned from the families, that law enforcement needs to change its attitude towards fentanyl deaths. And we heard that loud and clear. Law enforcement heard it loud and clear. Because law enforcement wasn't sure how to investigate these, because it was like, it's just another death, you know, maybe another person that died of a narcotic. And they didn't get the calls back. They didn't get calls back from law enforcement. They might not have investigated the way they should have. But under this bill, there's a grant program set up for law enforcement to be able to investigate comprehensively these deaths, and also to target the drug network, the high stakes network that is bringing fentanyl in from Mexico and from China. So that part is very important to me, and as I know it's very important to the family. So I want to thank the family for testifying on those issues, because it's changing the minds of law enforcement throughout the state that they need to do a better job investigating these kinds of deaths. So I just want to thank everybody here. Thank you all for showing up. And I would like to introduce Felice Sanchez Garcia, who had a sister die in Commerce City from fentanyl poisoning.
My name is Felice Sanchez Garcia. On behalf of all of our Blue Rising families, we want to thank Governor Polis, Speaker Garnett, Senator Patterson, and Senator Cook for this bill. I'm the older sister of Karina Joy Rodriguez, who was poisoned by fentanyl on February 20th, 2022. In trying to find support after losing my sister, our family was introduced to the Blue Rising Coalition of families, all of whom have experienced devastating loss of a loved one to fentanyl poisoning. Though that tie that brought us together was extremely tragic, this incredible group of family members have worked tirelessly on this legislation to ensure that other families don't have to endure the pain and devastation that we have had to go through. We are a unique and diverse group, sharing an unfathomable grief of having people we love most taken from us far too soon by this poison that is ravaging an entire generation. We have listened to each other's stories, held each other in prayer, and worked in love, not only for those we've lost, but also for those we are hoping to save. Our purpose and passion is to spare other families the anguish we endure every day. We use the term poisoning to describe what happened to our loved ones because their deaths were both unintentional and preventable. The prevalence of fentanyl being found in everything from cannabis to Adderall, from Percocet to cocaine, tells us that our family members were deceived and paid for it with their lives. Our family members did not overdose. They did not choose to gamble with fentanyl. They had no idea that they were being given fentanyl and would have walked away if ever given the choice. Drug dealers are choosing to sell fentanyl and poisoning people to death. We truly believe that this bill will save lives. The fentanyl crisis is deadlier than anything we have ever seen before, and it's only getting worse. This legislation is comprehensive and will ensure that Colorado tries to get ahead of this crisis. We're so thankful that this bill provides $5 million for public education campaigns on the dangers of fentanyl, what it looks like when someone is overdosing or being poisoned by fentanyl, and what to do to save a life. Millions of dollars will go towards life-saving fentanyl testing strips and Narcan distribution to those impacted by addiction as well as to casual users. $7 million for the Fentanyl Poisoning Investigation Fund to help law enforcement investigate these poisonings that are happening every day. Most of the families in our group did not have their loved ones' poisoning deaths investigated, leaving the families without closure and without a voice. Providing more funding for investigations will ensure that the dealers who are doling out death to make a quick buck will be held accountable. This bill establishes new penalties for distribution resulting in death, which gives families hope that justice will come for the innocent people who were poisoned. This bill starts the process of holding social media accountable for their role in the fentanyl crisis by allowing drugs to be bought and sold on their platforms. The Attorney General will develop a plan and necessary laws that are needed to hold them civilly and criminally liable. Parents need to know that sites like Snapchat, where teens and young people are buying these illegal drugs and fake prescription drugs. Social media companies need to be held to a higher standard to stop dealers from distributing fentanyl. As a group, we have shared stories of our loved ones, not to gain sympathy, but to educate the public and save lives. We desperately want to spare others what we have gone through. This bill strikes the right balance of public health and public safety. Deaths caused by this drug are not just statistics, they are our brothers, our sisters, our sons and daughters, and our mothers and fathers. For every one of these deaths, there is a grieving family trying to piece their life back together, and collectively we have used our grief to fight for this bill in order to save others. Each of our loved ones had a story and had people who loved them. They all had names and they will never be forgotten. These are their names: Ignacio Landa Ramirez Jr.,
Jack Ledden,
Alex Young,
Maddie Globe,
Yesenia Chavez,
Keith James,
Brianna Mullins,
Dan McMahon,
Braden
is that?
Braden Burks,
Andrew Rivieri,
Stephen Rivieri,
Christina Kaufman,
Tyler Shell,
Philip Doyle,
Andrew Bleskowski,
Ross Panning,
Devin Carney,
Alexia Alirez,
Karina Rodriguez,
Alex Taylor,
Ashley Romero,
Emily Adams.
and Connor Bomberg. This bill is not just in honor of our loved ones, it is for all those killed by fentanyl throughout Colorado and across the country that have not had their voices heard. It's for all those families suffering in silence. We see you and we stand with you. And now I believe I'm supposed to pass over to Tia Mason. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Brian Mason. I'm the District Attorney for Colorado's 17th Judicial District, which includes Adams and Broomfield counties. Fentanyl is ravaging our communities all across Colorado, and we had to act. This bill is a huge step forward in addressing the fentanyl crisis in this state. And I also want to thank the families. We are here in large part because of you. And the overall goal of this bill, no matter which side of the debate you were on, is to prevent more death. And I want to thank the families for teaching us that when someone dies from fentanyl, it's not an overdose, it's a poisoning. And we have to do and had to do something about these poisonings. I want to thank the governor. I want to thank Speaker Garnett for his courageous leadership, Senator Patterson, Senator Cook for theirs as well, and all of the people who worked so hard on this bill. There are those who said this bill goes too far, and there are those who say this bill doesn't go far enough. To those who say it goes too far, I say to you, watch how we use these new tools. I welcome the scrutiny. I think you will see that our goal in using these tools is to get fentanyl off the streets, to prevent more death, and to hold accountable those who are distributing this poison. Our goal is not to lock up low-level users. It is to get them help and to get them treatment. And to those who say this bill doesn't go far enough, I say, let's use these tools that we have never had before. Let's use them with integrity and wisdom and address this fentanyl crisis with the tools we now have. And when we need more, which we surely will, we can come back with a track record to show how we used the tools that we were given. No one should die from fentanyl poisoning. This bill is a start, and I'm proud to have been a part of it, and I thank all of you for getting it across the finish line. Thank you.